Hello guys, this is Dan LaPlante from Mignolaverse.com, and I'm here today to talk to you about getting into the Hellboy universe. Reading order, what stuff you should do, etc., what formats you should use, give you some resources. Something that I really wish was, there are definitely some guides out there, but I really wish there was like a big cohesive thing that just like really got you going right from the start. So I wanted to make that. I thought it would be a great idea for a video. Especially like, I used to read Hellboy through high school, but I didn't get into the extended universe too much later, and at the time there really wasn't a whole lot to kind of guide me into that. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't read BPRD or anything like that. So I really wish I had something like that at that time. Now my first topic is reading order. Now there are a bunch of different ways you can read the Hellboy universe, which is really cool. It's not limited to just one direction. You can choose to go for through release order, or you can just go your own way, kind of pick your own path. But there's always that question of which books do I have to read to get this stuff? And for the most part, there's a lot of stuff you can kind of read on your own and jump right in, and it'll make perfect sense without any prior knowledge. And that's what I'm going to cover right now. There are a couple reading orders online you could check out if you wanted to. I know Mark Tweedale has one on Multiversity Comics. That one's kind of semi-release order-ish, just kind of built in a way to make it all kind of go from the beginning of when Hellboy came out and make it kind of make a sense in that regard. I don't know if you get what I mean there, but you can kind of go in a bunch of different orders. I've actually picked 5 base paths that you can kind of read everything in this order, and you can read from any of these points in the path and it'll all make sense. So the first one I have is the Hellboy path. This is probably the one that everybody's going to be using first, but you can start at any one of these and it'll all make perfect narrative sense. So you could start with Hellboy. This is starting with Seed of Destruction and going all the way to Hellboy in Hell. And forgive me, and I made this graphic in Google's Excel knockoff, and going all the way to the current arc of BPRD, The Devil You Know. Second is the BPRD arc, and for BPRD, you just have to read the first 5 Hellboy volumes. Actually, you can really get away with just reading Hellboy volumes 1 and 2 and 5, because, you don't necessarily need to get all the short stories and stuff. Basically, just Conqueror Worm explains, sets up BPRD. And then after that, you can just start reading all of BPRD Plague of Frogs in order. Then after that's Hell on Earth. And then Abe Sapien actually spins off of BPRD and runs tangentially to it. So it kind of branches off, then comes back in right as Devil You Know starts. And for that, you can read up to BPRD Hell on Earth Russia. Is the one I figured out. I think there's one other issue that fits in there, but it doesn't add anything. It's literally just Abe is there. And then you can start Abe Sapien, The Dark and Terrible. There's also a few other books before that, but those you could read anywhere. The first 2 trade paperbacks of Abe Sapien you can read at any time. They don't have any influence on the plot. You just jump right in to your heart's content. Nothing doesn't matter. Now, the one weird thing is the current arc of BPRD, The Devil You Know, which is basically the end to the entire timeline of Hellboy. You do need to read Pats 1 and 2 both. The only and then also Abe Sapien you should probably read too, because there's a lot of stuff going on in those. Those 3 things you need to read in their entirety to get The Devil You Know. BPRD, The Devil You Know is the only book that requires a lot of prior reading to actually be able to dive in and get. With the exception, obviously, of BPRD in itself. You can't just dive into the end of BPRD before reading the beginning. It's a one big narrative. But you don't need to read Witchfinder or anything like that. But BPRD, The Devil You Know, does require a lot. That's the one book that requires that. The rest of it's Hellboy. You just need to read Hellboy books. BPRD. You just need to read BPRD books. The next one, and number 3, is actually the path that I think is the best jumping in point for new readers, because it's the basic Hellboy. Because surprisingly, the Hellboy book is not what people really think of when they think Hellboy. They're actually thinking more along the lines of Hellboy in the BPRD, because Hellboy in the BPRD is a little more similar to the Guillermo del Toro / the Hellboy animated films. And I feel like this is like the best jumping on point for new readers. So what you want to do, I say you should probably read the first volume of Hellboy that basically just describes his origin story. That's kind of optional. If you already know that, then you don't really need to read that. I just put that there to kind of get people familiar with Hellboy. Then you need to start with BPRD 1946 to 1948. Now, this run's really easy to get. Anything that has 1940/50, anything that has a date 1956, 1942, or I don't know. Anything like that, you could just put those all in order and just read them in order. Read them in the order of the dates. It's very easy. So 1946 and 1948, actually, Professor Broom is the protagonist in these books. Well, 1947, like half protagonist. And so these are like basically the setup to Hellboy in the BPRD 1952 and on. But starting with Hellboy in the BPRD 1952, it takes the standard Hellboy archetype that everybody's kind of familiar with. They're coming from the films, and it's its own self-contained plot. Anything from lines 1, 2, 4, or 5, you don't actually need to know in order to start in plot 3. You can actually start in here and you'll know everything. And likewise, for plots 1 and 2, you actually don't need to know anything from the 1900s books in order to read those. You can actually just go in and read Hellboy in the BPRD or BPRD 1946 to 48 all on your own. And that's a great place to start, I think, for new readers. It's ongoing too, so if you get caught up in these books, you actually can start reading like along with the new releases and actually know what's going on. So I think this is a fantastic line for new readers to start off with, to get caught up and actually be able to get into like current talking about Hellboy stuff. You know, you can actually get hyped with people about a new book coming out. I think it's a really great book too. It's one of the best Hellboy books coming out right now. Not that there are a ton of Hellboy books coming out right now anyways, but it's still just a really good one. Chris Robertson's a great writer. Currently 1956 is coming out. It has a great cast of people. I don't know if you'd call it a cast. I don't know. The 1900s books, can't recommend them enough. So if you're a new reader, that's my recommendation where you start. The next two are actually their own things. Witchfinder on its own. You could read it anywhere. Start at the beginning of Witchfinder, go to the end. It's its own self-contained thing. There are definitely going to be things that spin off from Witchfinder in the future. But for now, Witchfinder as we know it, up till this one right here, at least that's what just came out. You can read it all, get it all on your own. Don't need any prior knowledge. It stands as its own. Stands on its own. Ugh. Lobster Johnson, same thing. It's completely detached from everything else in the Hellboy universe. It can stand on its own book. You could literally just read Lobster Johnson and be perfectly fine. Volume 1 is a little weird, just to let you know, because it kind of is its own thing. Starting with Volume 2, there's an ongoing plot. Volume 1 kind of references the Vril energy suit, and it is a little bit of a BPRD thing, but not really. You could honestly skip Volume 1 and be perfectly fine. You don't even really need to read it. I mean, you should. It's a great book, but I'm just saying, like, you don't have to. And this gets us into the spin-off books. As of right now, there are 6 books. That's Koschei the Deathless. I can say that. Nobody knows how to pronounce it. The Visitor, How and Why He Stayed. Rise of the Black Flame. Crimson Lotus, which is currently going on. Sledgehammer 44, and Frankenstein Underground. Now, the thing about these books, I recommend that you start reading these later. I would read any one of these runs, and basically, when you see a character show up that's one of these books, because all these books surround a central character, basically, whenever you see a character that you recognize from one of these books, because each one of them surrounds a central character. Koschei the Deathless surrounds Koschei. Visitor surrounds the Visitor. You know, right? The Black Flame surrounds the Black Flame. Frankenstein Underground surrounds Frankenstein Underground. All of these things, you get it. You just go ahead and read their book. Just whenever you spot one of them, go for it if you want to. They don't really have anything to do with any of these narratives. You can just kind of jump in on one of them. I like to think of each of these reading orders as being like the main entree, and these 6 books as being like condiments. You can kind of sprinkle them in whenever you want to, kind of change things up. They're not really important for the overall book, but they're fantastic books in their own right. You do still need to kind of know who the characters are for some of them. Some more so than others, although not really. I'd say Rise of the Black Flame probably would benefit the most from actually reading something with the Black Flame in it. Maybe less so the other ones. The Visitor, maybe a little bit, but it just kind of helps to have some pre-existing knowledge of the character. I think the books work better that way too. They expose the characters a little bit better if you go that way. The funny thing about the Hellboy universe, and the thing I think is most creative about it, is that a lot of new characters that get books, you're exposed to basically at the end of their narrative arc, or at the end of like their lives sometimes, in some cases. Not all of them, but a large majority of them they are. And then you go on to read their book, and it kind of starts from the beginning. And I think that's a really cool thing, and I would really encourage people to go and do that, you know. I think that's just a really cool quality of the Hellboy universe, but you don't have to go by that. I just think it's a really neat way to introduce a character and then start their narrative after their arc ends. It's kind of weird. But yeah, that's basically the Hellboy reading order in a nutshell. I hope this graphic helps you out. Now, the next thing I want to get into is the format for which you use to read these. It can be a little bit tricky sometimes, but I definitely am going to recommend that you stick with the trade paperbacks or the collected editions, whichever one you prefer. But you can certainly go with single issues if you want to. I'm going to explain the pros and cons of each, and things that'll help you out, especially if you're going with the single issue route. Things that'll help you get through that, and things that'll help you keep your sanity. But let's start off with the trades. I have a trade right here. I also have a collected edition of BPRD. I have a hardcover too. They're the same thing, but, you know, just wanted to get both. The great thing about the trades is, as you might guess, they keep them in a very consistent reading order. Not necessarily the order they came out in, mind you. That's a big deal. If you want to go in order of how the issues came out one by one, single issues might be a little bit better for you because they kind of came out of order sometimes. The trades kind of retroactively go back and put them into a better reading order. That makes a bit more sense. But the trades also just keep everything nice, with the benefit added in of they always have little behind-the-scenes things, little sketchbooks. Dark Horse trades are very nice. Now, these are American trades. They kind of differ in different countries, I know. I think European trades are, in general, pretty similar, but there are some countries that do things differently. Actually, there are some countries that actually bind these in hardcovers, which is kind of interesting. I actually want to get my hands on some of those just to have them. I wouldn't be able to read them, I think. Maybe they're in English, I don't know. But in America, they bind them in soft covers. These are really nice. They fit on the shelf really nice. I love these things. It's built really well. The paper is always really nice. I've always just loved the aesthetic of the Hellboy trade paperbacks. Each series gets its own little thingamajig. I don't know. I love these. Especially, I don't have a Lobster Johnson one on me, but they always have like a little old-timey comic pricing thing on them. But these are absolutely the best way to go when it comes to reading all the Hellboy universe stuff. But say you're adventurous, like me, for instance, and you want to read in single issues. That is totally doable. I did that for a lot of them. But it's difficult. Here's the reasons why. So, for instance, when you get into BPRD, especially Hell on Earth, which was a fun time for me, things get a little dicey because you get into parts where BPRD is generally divided up into series, and those series are like BPRD Return of the Master or something like that. The Garden. I'm trying to just think of ones off the top of my head. But those are all labeled as like 1 through 5. Then they decided randomly in the middle of it, maybe it would be better if we just labeled these 124 or 125. Then they started going back to doing like arcs. And then they went right now they're back to doing numbers. Or actually they're doing BPRD The Devil You Know number 12. This is the most recent issue at the time. That makes things really confusing. Especially if you're using an app like Legion of Comic Geeks. They're labeled really inconsistently, but there is a saving grace. If you want to, I want to show you on the inside of each cover of any Hellboy Universe book, or at least the single issues, I mean. For instance, in this issue, you can actually see on the inside, it says number 159 in the series. That means this is, in order of release, the 159th issue of BPRD. Anything with BPRD in the title, excluding Hellboy and the BPRD, that's its own thing. This is 159th in that whole order. Now, that actually does, I have to admit, it does include BPRD 1946 through 1948. Don't get confused with that. These are the prequels to, this is the prequel, effectively, of Hellboy and the BPRD. I would suggest reading them in that order. But, yeah, so of everything BPRD related, barring Hellboy and the BPRD, this is number 156. Or 159, rather. And that's really helpful, especially if you're just looking in general for what order they came out in. But an even easier way to deal with this, now that you know that everything's actually ordered in that order, is going on to Hellboy Wiki. Hellboy Wiki is a fantastic resource for this type of thing, especially if you're collecting these. One of the other benefits of getting the single issues is obviously if you intend on collecting them, it's just great to read them as you get them. So, I mean, obviously it sucks because then you have to actually find them. And like, while I was able to go to my local comic shop and actually pick up actually, I think I got all of BPRD Vampire, all the single issues of that in just a bundle recently. But it's not very common that you get that. You usually will get like maybe 3 out of 5 of an arc. But on like eBay or something like that, say that's where you're ordering them from. It's a fantastic way to do it. But the fantastic thing is Hellboy Wiki has every single issue of every single franchise laid out in exactly the order that they came out in. So that means if you Google, say, BPRD reading order Hellboy Wiki, the first thing that will come up is the reading order on Hellboy Wiki. You'll find that it actually lists like number 159, then name BPRD The Devil You Know number 12. It's really helpful. It actually keeps me super sane because you'll pick up issues and you'll be like, where does this go in the canon? Am I going to read this accidentally and then realize that something else came before it and I just spoiled it because I read it out of order? Oh my god. This is also helpful for Abe Sapien, the Dark and Terrible, because Abe Sapien's weird. Because there were 10 issues before the Dark and Terrible came out, issue 1 of Abe Sapien, the Dark and Terrible is actually issue 11 of Abe Sapien on the internal numbering. It's really weird, but it just helps keep everything in order. If you get confused, just use Hellboy Wiki. It's fantastic. For BPRD, I highly suggest the Omnibuses. The softcover ones are a little cheaper than the hardcovers. They kind of go in and out of print every once in a while. I know sometimes you can't find them, but you can also get them on digital. I think you can get them on Comixology, probably. Just a really great deal in general. You get so much, and there's a lot of them, but absolutely, this is the best way to read BPRD, in my opinion. I actually prefer this over the hardcovers, just because these are a little easier to fold and read. Like, some of the hardcovers can be a little difficult to read. Like, that's pretty much an issue with all comic book hardcovers. But these just fold really nicely. Really great page build, you know, that sort of deal. Nice page build, am I right? Also, the big omnibuses come with some extra sketchbook stuff in the back. All these nice extras. And in general, you know, they're just great. I love these. Take off the... I love slip covers. I love the surprise of what the hell's going to be underneath it. Very simple, but who cares? I loved it. So hopefully this was pretty helpful for you. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments. Maybe in the future I'll make a more expanded version of this video if I found out I left stuff out, or if, like, in the future there's probably going to be more books, so it might be helpful to like go through and read those. I know I didn't actually talk about things like BPRD Vampire, which is actually a spin-off of BPRD 1947, and exclusively 1947. In the future, I'm expecting there to be a lot more books. I know Witchfinder and Lobster Johnson are about to take a much bigger presence just because BPRD is ending. And I don't know, like, we're going to have Hellboy in the BPRD basically for eternity. And then... And Witchfinder and Lobster Johnson are now just kind of like their big other books. But, you know... yeah, I'm excited for the future of Hellboy. I really hope you guys find this video helpful. Leave your questions in the comments. Check out our other stuff. I know we have a lot going on. Recently, I haven't been super active on the website itself just because, I don't know, life. But, you know, I'm getting back into it. I'm going to order a new camera at some point soon. I think soon I'm going to order more lighting. I really want to upgrade my build quality here. I don't even want to tell you what I'm shooting on right now. But, you know, subscribe to us. Also, one other thing, I want to start doing some live stuff. I could live stream the video games and stuff. I have a capture card and everything, but I also want to do other things like, I don't know if reading my comics live would be interesting with my commentary. Just live streaming sort of stuff that I'd like to see what you guys think of that. But let me know for some ideas in the comments. It's kind of weird to do a live stream for comic book stuff. We could do a live podcast, that's for sure. The issue is that Kevin lives in the exact opposite time zone of America, Japan. Basically exact opposite, I don't know. Why am I hearing the rocks from the Blair Witch Project outside my house? Weird, I'm probably going to die tonight. But yeah, it's still kind of difficult to get a podcast together. What I am planning on doing is doing some videos on the Hellboy movies and all the Hellboy media. I have played through some of the games, meaning the 2 games. I have not finished one of them. The other one I have gotten decently far in, though. So, yeah. So just let me know all sorts of stuff. Let me know what videos you want to see. I am still working on a review. It's just taking longer than I thought it would because I had to get stuff together. You know, all that dandy stuff. So, thank you very much, guys. I need to think of a better outro. Mignolaverse away!